And a two, and a one, and we're live. Here we are. It's now, gosh, are we up to presentation number 4? The AVConf first we of the dashboard project. That project for us. I think very exciting project. Actually, one of the biggest in terms of the number of commits. React and Rails project, very popular, both in Agile Ventures and outside. Sage, please take it away and tell us all about the project.
Sure. Hi, I'm Sage, and my Agile Ventures project is the WikiEduDashboard. So let me just fire up my presentation here and see. Maybe do that. Oh no, that's not gonna. Oh, all right. Not entirely sure how to make this do exactly what I want it to do, but I guess we'll just let's be close enough. First of all, my project is the WikiEduDashboard, and I'm Sage Ross. I work at WikiEducation, which is a nonprofit that helps college instructors bring Wikipedia into their classrooms, and we do other things as well around the intersection between academia and Wikimedia projects. So about me, I've been a Wikipedian since 2005, and in sort of my previous career trajectory, I was a historian of science. I was in grad school to study the history of science, and I became so wrapped up in writing Wikipedia articles that I didn't finish my dissertation. And just right at the right moment, I ended up getting a job with this pilot program at the Wikimedia Foundation to do classroom assignments in colleges. And so I was kind of in a community management position, online facilitator. And basically doing communications type stuff, building training material, that sort of thing. And I transitioned into doing product management because there was no one else to kind of do that when we finally started to build some technology around facilitating these classroom assignments as they started to grow. And then I became a nominally full-time product manager in 2014, when I shifted from Wikimedia Foundation to this spin-off organization that I work for now, WikiEducation. And that's when I got into software. That's when I started coding, when I was working as the product manager, sort of supervising and guiding like a design development team that we were contracting with to build the first version of our project. So just a little bit about the WikiEduDashboard itself. Its main purpose is to help newcomers get started on Wikipedia and keep track of their contributions so that both the Wikipedia community and the WikiEducation staff and the instructors can all have a clear view of what the students are doing on Wikipedia, help them course correct if they're going wrong, and basically save a lot of the time of becoming an expert in understanding how Wikipedia works before you dive into Wikipedia. So we try to make it so that people don't have to be experts before they get started. So we started this project in 2014, and a design development agency in Seattle built the initial version of it over the course of about a year and a half. And we gradually ran out of money to fund continued development for it. And so it was kind of like a very expensive internship for me, where I, along the way, learned a lot of the skills that I needed to be able to maintain it myself. And so since 2006, I've been maintaining this project myself, and gradually trying to build a development community around it, with, at this point, what I would say is an amount of success that I'm pretty pleased with. Yeah, we have 75 different contributors to date, about 2/3 of whom are open source contributors and like interns and volunteers. And the other third is a mix of people from the development agency who originally built it and professional developers from Wikimedia Foundation who've collaborated on it at various points in time. So this project runs 2 different production instances, one of which is my organization's main dashboard website, dashboard.wikiedu.org. And to date, we've had about 40,000 users. We have these days, each semester in the sort of North American academic world, we support about 400 classes and about 8,000 students. And so these are for our programs, and it's mainly focused on English Wikipedia. We also have another production instance, the Programs and Events Dashboard at outreachdashboard.wmflabs.org. And this is an instance that we support for anyone in the Wikimedia community to use for their own diverse projects. So this one is kind of focused on the global community, and it works in any language that has a Wikipedia, and also other projects as well, like Wikivoyage, Wikidata, Wikisource, Wiktionary. It has about 15,000 users. So the main technologies of the project are React and Rails, and we're in the middle of a migration to Redux. We started adding React to it when it was still the mainly being driven by the development agency, and these were early days of React in 2015, and so we picked some libraries that didn't turn out to be the main ones that that the React community went with, and so we're still in some ways dealing with the technical debt from that. But overall, it's in pretty good shape in terms of continued ease of development, and we're pretty happy with React. You can see some of the stats on the slide here. We've got a fair bit of JavaScript, and then Ruby on Rails. It's pretty standard in terms of the Rails side, the server side, and we've been able to keep it pretty well up to date. It's been pretty smooth migrations for the last several upgrades. So that's about 12,000 lines of Ruby, and fairly complete test coverage on the server side. So I'll just draw a quick picture of how the data architecture of this system works. We have our main project, the Rails backend, and it constantly is firing off jobs to fetch edit data from Wikipedia. So we have a sidekick process that's just constantly saying, okay, what are the latest edits that this group of people did for this class? And what is the latest bunch of uploads that they made for files on Wikimedia Commons? And that's how it continually keeps up-to-date data that we can use to show people what the students have done on Wikipedia. And then we have a front end that is basically a mix of React and a little bit of Haml server-side stuff. And hello, Evie. My daughter just got up. And it mostly fetches data from our own backend, but also a fair amount directly from Wikipedia and from a third-party service that can provide authorship data, so showing you which parts of a Wikipedia article are edited by which person. And I'll demo that here in a few minutes. But that's kind of in broad strokes, what the tangled web of our data architecture looks like. And in terms of Agile Ventures, over the last, 2+ years that I've been part of the community, I've been trying to gradually make it sort of learn what it takes to manage issues and manage the project in a way that makes it pretty accessible to newcomers. And so right now we've got kind of a lot of different things that in one way or another are pretty open for contributions from volunteer developers. So there's a lot of mobile tweaks and like layout improvements, redesigning of crowded interfaces, this kind of thing, CSS cleanup, new features that don't have design yet. If you're interested in design, got plenty that I could point you to. In terms of the JavaScript front end, we have some really interesting data visualization things that we're currently doing in other ways, in a kind of rickety system based on shelling out to R to generate some graphs on the front end that has not been very reliable, and moving that kind of thing into a front end rendering of some pretty cool data visualizations is something I'm pretty interested in. As I mentioned earlier, we're in the middle of migration from Flux to Redux for our data store for React. And we also have React Router 3 instead of 4, which is a major shift if you've followed that at all. And then, of course, there's always new features to do. And we have the basics of testing in place, but we still don't really have a good story about how one ought to write component tests. And so we mostly don't. But if you're interested in like setting a better standard for how to write component tests well, that's something I would love help with. And then on the Rails side, always the kind of usual plenty of things where performance could be improved. Some kind of core Railsy refactorings around controllers that are ripe for new contributors. And in terms of the build, we've kind of gradually digging ourselves out from the technologies that were in vogue when we started the project. And people have been experimenting with Docker for a dev environment, and we'd love to move over to Webpacker from kind of our older gulp plus Webpack config. So that's kind of that's all that I prepared for the slides here. And as you kind of probably saw, there's lots that available to do. There's also a lot that folks have already done, folks from Agile Ventures and elsewhere. So I'll maybe show off a little of that now. So really quickly, like here is what our interface looks like for in tracking a course. So we have all the students that are in it, keeps track of what they're assigned, how much they've contributed. You can say, oh, they worked on this article, philosophical skepticism. Well, what did they do there? And you can load up this authorship highlighting tool. So it shows you the live Wikipedia article without having to go all the way to Wikipedia. And if you wait for a little bit, then you get data about which user contributed which part of that article. So you can see that this was a pair of students who worked together, and one of them wrote this big section, and another one wrote this section. So that's super useful for instructors who are trying to keep track of what the students have done. We also can track the uploads that students have done to Wikimedia Commons and various other things. One of the things that I'll just show off that's a really appreciated contribution from an Agile Ventures contributor is our settings page. So this is a front end for tasks that I used to have to do completely on the back end of managing adminship. And so this was done by Jacob Stobel, and it's done in React, and it's kind of a good starting point. Hello. My dog just came in from a walk. I better switch over to give you a quick view of him. All right, how's she going? So this is like a good starting framework for hopefully having a bunch of other settings and like configuration management tasks to be able to be done on the front end as well. So that was a really excellent contribution among many from the Agile Ventures community. Another thing that I just wanted to highlight real quick is a current project that a Google Summer of Code intern is working on with me. And this is the article finder tool. So the idea here is you're an instructor and you want to find articles that are underdeveloped on Wikipedia, but that are pretty popular. And so are kind of ripe for your students making a real impact. And so this article finder tool is what we're trying to build to make that happen. So let's just look up Agile development. And so this is going to query a whole bunch of different endpoints that provide Wikipedia data, so that you can get an estimate of how well developed the article is, including its what the Wikipedia community has rated it as well as the average views per day, so you know which of these articles are really popular. And so this fetched the first 50 results from Wikipedia and then said, okay, now what are the page views and metadata for each of these? And the one that stands out when I do this here is solid. So the solid principles. This gets 1,300 views per day, but it's rated as a start class article. So it's not actually very well developed. And we can see what it actually looks like here. And it really is just the bare outline of it. And it has actually links to more detailed articles about each of the principles in solid. But in terms of an overview of the role that acronym as a whole, that concept as a whole plays, that's, for example, something that if you were a computer science professor and you were having your students write Wikipedia articles, this might be a great thing to assign someone, because there's plenty of low-hanging fruit for improvement. So that's kind of the basics of it. That's what I wanted to show off. And I guess I'll turn it over for questions.
Sure.
Awesome. Go on. Yeah, question, Nico.
Yeah, I have one. For example, if we want to identify the issues or the stories, what are you using? And you are using just GitHub, and we can go there and search for, I don't know, a label that says friendly or start.
That's right. So we use GitHub for tracking issues, and one of the habits that I've gotten into that we first started doing with self-consciously to make it easy on Agile Ventures contributors is to really have a big set of tags that we use. And so there's tags not only by kind of newcomer friendly or help wanted. So help wanted is not necessarily newcomer friendly, but something that if you're a more advanced contributor is a good one. Newcomer friendly is something where it's hopefully pretty well isolated in terms of you only have to understand one small part of the system.
Yeah.
And then also we tag it by technology. And so if you want something where it's focused on implementing front-end stuff, implementing CSS, then we have CSS tags. If it's something where you want to get into the JavaScript front end, we have React. And then Rails is the other sort of main tag in terms of technology. So the combination of those two is how we try to do that.
Cool. Nice. Thank you.
Great stuff. Yeah, so I don't know if we have any more questions. We might have questions coming in from the chat channel there. I'll just ask there. I have some of my own, actually, if no one else wants to jump in. I was just going to ask, it's interesting seeing the architecture overview, and obviously lots of, the MediaWiki APIs are being used and so on. The MediaWiki itself, of course, is a PHP stack. The tech stack for the dashboard is then Rails and React. Can you talk at all about the design choice there? Would it have been easier to sort of choose the same stack as MediaWiki? Was there a desire to move away from that?
Sure. So that's a great question. The short answer is that I deferred to the development agency, basic, like when we made the initial choice of what technology to use. So I spent a lot of time talking with different development agencies, but like looking at the quality of their work and like kind of their design practices, and like knowing that we wanted to have something that like looked good and that felt like that sort of, not 2001 era web application was the main criteria. And like the choice of which technology they use was like, I paid attention to it, but I was in the role of someone who wasn't in a position to make a good judgment about whether that was the right choice or not. And so I had to trust them for going with Ruby and with React. I will say though that like not going with PHP like was in part an intentional choice, because we'd already recognized, and it's become even more clear in the couple years since, that like it's not that easy to find like PHP developers these days. Like that Facebook, of course, employs an enormous number of them, but very few like boot camps are teaching PHP. Very few new developers are specializing in PHP, and so like I think in the Agile Ventures community, for example, I mean that's in some ways determined by the course structure and the fact that you focus on Rails to begin with, but like you just don't see a lot of like big like early level developers focusing heavily on PHP, and it's hard to recruit for PHP. And so like that was intentional. Basically, I had a strong feeling that like all else being equal, like going with either a Python shop or a Ruby shop like seemed like the best idea at the time. This was 2014. And in the years since, like I really like Ruby and am really pleased with like the decision. I mean, I think I would have been happy with Python as well, but like I've come to identify as a Rubyist, and I really like Ruby and the Ruby community, and think it's been a great foundation for this project. And similarly, React, it took me a little longer to come around to it, but it's a really great ecosystem, and I think it's kept up with us just fine, and I'm pretty happy with React as well.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. Yes, Nico, were you unmuting to ask a follow-up question?
No, just an ambulance passed by. So
all right, you're muting and I'm muting.
Sorry,
yeah.
I didn't want to.
Oh, no worries. Yes, I guess that following on from some other of our talk, we'll be talking about the challenges of working with volunteers. I mean, I imagine that the majority of the functionality was provided by this initial work from the design agency, and then so now it's this question of kind of like tweaks and things. Is that the kind of balance that it's really sort of tweaking things, or are you seeing like major new sort of streaks of development coming from the different interns and volunteers that you're working with?
In a lot of ways, like there have been a lot of fairly major things that have been implemented since we stopped working with the agency. So actually, one of the other things that I was gonna show, which I can now to sort of just give you a little taste, is, let's see. Oh, that's not gonna be the right one. So here's an event that is a like art plus feminism event, which is an edit-a-thon where like there's lots of local events where people focus on improving the biographies of women, primarily women artists. This one is based on Arabic Wikipedia, and so here are the uploads that participants did. So they uploaded these images to illustrate articles. So while we were still working with the agency, but like this is something that I did rather than they did, was build this whole thing, like the back end side to pull in the images that people have contributed, like all the Rails side of that, as well as the front end side. And then right now I have an outreachy intern, Urvashi, and she's been working on improving the interface for this. So this used to be kind of a fairly ugly table that you couldn't see very many images at once. And she implemented this switch over to a gallery view. And then just actually this week, just yesterday, we deployed her latest bit of work, which is you can now actually toggle between different views. So if you want to see a tabular view where you can see who uploaded what and the order that they were uploaded, you can do that. Or if you want to just focus on the images themselves, you can do that. And if you want somewhere in between, then you have this view where you can see a lot of them at once, but also get all of the metadata. So that whole feature was contributed by several different people and over a long period of time, but totally independently. I've also basically rewritten most of the kind of backend architecture for pulling in data on a regular basis to like keep up with the increased usage of it. So when they built it, basically they could have a single process that ran on a cron job and would just pull in all the latest things. When we started working, so last year, for example, is when the global version of the dashboards really started to take off. And one of the projects that used it is called Wikidata Wiki Project India. So Wikidata is kind of a structured data project on Wikipedia, where it basically has a lot of linked facts as opposed to articles themselves. And so it's kind of fuel for like machine learning and like the semantic web. And one of the hallmarks of it is that a lot of the contributions are done in scripted fashion. And so there's huge volumes of data that get created and curated and imported and that kind of thing. So people set up this project to keep track of a group of editors who were doing a bunch of India-related Wikidata work. And this group of people in the last 9 months, this has tracked 1.17 million edits. And they were making a huge number of edits on a regular basis, also like 12,000 uploads. And this was basically just like crushing the system. Like it was trying to regularly pull in, okay, for all of these articles, which ones are still live on Wikipedia? So it would periodically say, okay, I'm going to check every single article and say like which ones got deleted in the meantime and that kind of thing. And so I moved all that to Sidekick jobs and reorganized it so that like the short programs that are not taking much resources can get refreshed on a quick basis. And ones like this that would otherwise just slog the system down can be in kind of a low priority queue where every, however long it takes, they'll get updated, but it doesn't have to be fast. And like, so the other thing that is basically completely new since we stopped working with the development agency is a kind of higher level collection, like the system for higher level collections of courses. So we call these campaigns, and this is the Art Plus Feminism 2018 campaign. Oh, I'm not showing anything right now. Whoops. And so it's visually a kind of similar interface, but this is not showing individual editors. This is showing a whole group of courses or events. and the aggregate activity that they had. So this capacity for showing, okay, who are all of the editors who participated in, that series of events? That's all new. There's a big system of alerts that like individually have all been small, but these are things that like specific conditions that we want to check for and let somebody know about. Like, oh, this article is in danger of being deleted, or this class, the students have not completed the training modules that they were supposed to complete. And including like sending automated emails and that kind of thing. So that's stuff that primarily I've built myself over the last few years and extended. So in terms of like the core functionality, I'd say maybe 2/3 of it is what was originally there, and another third is what we've added on since then, as well as I've like rewritten large portions of the original code.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds like. Well, I guess, did you get the design agency to commit to open source early on, or was it taken open source after the design agency kind of let go of it?
No, yeah, it was open source from the beginning. I mean, that was part of the
deal.
Part of the contract.
Yeah, no, and I guess I'm sure that there were challenges along the way. It sounds like you've done quite well out of that. You've got the open source code. It was not designed in such a way that it was extraordinarily problematic to build new features on top of it. You kind of were able to extend, it was reasonably well architectured at least, or even maybe amazingly well architectured. I mean, it's obviously difficult to know sometimes because you don't know what changes you want to make. But yeah, I mean, that seems to address this issue that I fear for many groups working with design agencies, that they get kind of locked in to a closed source solution that the design agency produces, and then they're sort of, for any changes they want in the future, they're beholden to continue paying the rates for that design agency.
I mean, I think that could have been how it turned out, right? Like, that was kind of the model that we went in with. We weren't, like planning to say, okay, well, we're going to have them build this over a certain period of time, and then we'll call it done. Or, we thought that we would still have, we were optimistic that we would have more money to put into the development,
right,
in the meantime. And so we kind of expected most of it to continue to be done by them. And right. I think that, like a combination of like just doing the product management, like, I had a fair bit of spare cycles during that period. And I just turned out to like really enjoy coding in a way that I didn't expect to. Like, I would say, I had dabbled in like programming, like written some Python scripts, and like also written a little bit of PHP for the like previous version, like the integrated with MediaWiki thing that this replaced. And like, I got to the point where I'm like, okay, so I kind of see how this works. Like I have a sense for what it's like to, build software. And I just can't imagine doing this like all day long. Seems like the worst thing. Like, I get it, but it's just so tedious. Right. And so like that was my perspective on it at the time. And I didn't expect to like get to the point where it kind of turned that around and said, this is actually like, it's wonderful. Like, I love doing this stuff. So, it was just serendipity in some sense.
Yeah. It's an awesome project. And you probably have to go. My final comment, which don't feel you need to like engage in this, or if of course if you do and you've got time and you're interested. But what's fascinating about the project is the way in which it sort of takes this academic activity, like lots and lots of students around the world are writing essays on, all sorts of topics, and it engages them with Wikipedia, which is, I think, an interesting thing in and of itself. But it means that all of the effort being made by those students, which has got value for themselves internally, is actually potentially being shared. So, like, there are Wikipedia articles that are maybe not so developed, and it's sort of increasing the store of human knowledge. I mean, I think Wikipedia is already just an incredibly awesome shared resource, but to sort of be able to take the work that people are doing, you know, in their different classes and so on, and sort of have that help boost the sort of shared knowledge of the species is extraordinary. What it makes me think of is how we're sort of trying to do the same thing in Agile Ventures, which is, you know, all the people who are like coding while they're learning to try and have that, you know, contribute to shared resources. It seems to me that it's just it's. I wish it was as easy. Maybe it isn't actually easy. You know, what you've got is an amazing scaffold that helps make it work perhaps more times than not for these different classroom environments. But it just made me think of, you know, could computer science professors have a view of, you know, like a dashboard that would allow them to see which parts of which open source projects their students have been committing their code to. But yeah, like just trying to take lots and lots of beginning coders' work and bring it together in a way that leads to positive outcomes of the project as well as the learning things just seems particularly hard.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, you know, the sort of shared outlook on the potential there, right, to leverage, you know, the really like powerful work that people are doing as learners, to like make that something that is not just going to evaporate at the end of the semester. Like that's why I got involved with Agile Ventures in the first place. I was like, well, this is like, you know, this is philosophically like right aligned with us. This seems like cool, and they're, you know, it's kind of a Rails centric community, and so I was like, I'll give it a shot. And like, I think that it's definitely the case that like it's not easy, and I think both in terms of like the coordinating software development with a community like this, and in terms of like the assignments that we do in classrooms with Wikipedia, like the nut of the idea is right, and like it has an enormous amount of potential, and it's all of the little things that like are potential blockers, as well as managing kind of at a slightly higher level, like the scale of it. How do you make sure that you know, can take what worked for the first pilot group, and where it was super high touch, and you know, you could sort of use your mind to work around this and guide people in the right way, and how do you take that and scale it to, you know, 10 times as many, 100 times as many people? And so that's, for us at least, it's been a major mix of coming up with really sort of clear guidelines that we refine over time. So we, you know, instead of like giving a lot of autonomy for the instructor to say, okay, well, what do you want your assignment to look like, right? Now we really provide some pretty clear templates and scaffolds for like, this is what you should do for a Wikipedia assignment. These are the stages. These are the trainings that you should assign your students. These are the ways that you should think about, you know, choosing articles and topics. This is where your expertise as a content expert comes in, versus this is where these are kind of the Wikipedia rules. And if you want to work with us, you have to go in this direction when you do these things. So part of it was that. Part of it is, you know, we have a staff that's been now, like many of them, working on refining our processes for, you know, 4 years, 5 years now. So like a lot of people who have a really clear understanding of where the stumbling blocks are. And then of course, like automating the things that we can automate. And, you know, none of that is fast. But like, it's stuff that you can make incremental progress on. And it seems like for software development, the big problem, right, is that, at least as I see it, is that you don't have as much ability. Like, it's moving so fast, and there's so many different like avenues to go down, that like you have an intermediate kind of path of like, it's more or less a Rails focused community, but it's not completely limited to that. You have a kind of diversity of projects. You have people working on Elixir. You have a whole variety of front end stuff going on. The kind of other direction from that, right, would be what was it like Free Code Bootcamp does, where they actually like prescribe the technology, like the framework choices a little more clearly. Like no matter what though, the shape of a Wikipedia assignment, right, we can keep pretty stable even over the last 5 years. In some ways you can't do that with software development, with web development, because it's just been moving too quickly. In terms of like, you know, like even now it's like Rails is something where some people like there's waffling of whether that's like the right choice to like kick people off with or not now. And legitimately so. Like it's still definitely a totally usable good choice, but it's not clear that if you were starting a boot camp right now that that's what you would want to do.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. The I mean, although interestingly, I think there is like a pattern of the way that you do problem solving and the way that you do pull requests and the way that you work with version control that's sort of stabilized. And I guess what I would love to have is at some point the funds like you've had to do something that kind of, you know, was the equivalent of the block that you've started with in terms of, you know, a really focused period that produces this MVP. I think we're almost still like pre-MVP for us in terms of that onboarding. In terms
of like a scaffold for like guiding people's contributions and like guiding a whole project, guiding a tech project.
Right. I mean, we've got like a few like notes that we've written, and there's some like templates and what have you, but it's still it's sort of scattered and far away from where you are. It's yeah, but it's fascinating. You got an extraordinary project, and I'm so pleased that Agile Ventures has been able to provide a little bit of extra value there. I'm going to have to nip off now because I've got, you know, more presentations coming up. But do you know, we're also doing this thing where that was you know, all broadcast. I'll turn the broadcast off now. People who want to hang around and chat without being video, which is a perfectly, although I can't understand why anybody would not want to be video 24/7. I pretty much stream my entire life. But for those people who are shy, is it? I'm not sure what it is. We'll pop the broadcast off.